Jeffrey Bear has been seeing ghosts lately, ghost signs to be precise. These are signs advertising businesses that haven't been in business for years, or in some cases, decades. They're not just novelties, each one has a story to tell. Tonight we take another look at these signs of times gone by on Hidden Chicago.
Doug Frierson isn't a sign painter. His real job is restoring historic homes, including many by Frank Lloyd Wright. But he was more than a little excited about touching up this 1920s-era sign for an Oak Park tailor shop. That's because the sign was discovered in his company's own headquarters when they broke through a wall to do some remodeling.
When we saw the sign, we were just blown away. This was beautiful, and the sign was in pretty good shape. So rather than cut through the doorway where we planned, we just changed all of our design work so that we could use this room as a conference room and feature the sign.
This treasure was buried, but many great old ghost signs are hiding in plain sight. High above State Street in the Loop is an old painted ad for the Boston store, which once stood at State and Madison. By the time it went out of business in 1945, it had lost its luster and was even ridiculed in this rhyme. All the girls who wear high heels, they all shop at Marshall Field's. All the girls who scrub the floor, they all shop at the Boston store. Atop the old Litton's building at State and Jackson is a ghost sign advertising the menswear store's nickname, The Hub. The company stopped using the nickname in the 1940s. It went out of business in the 1980s. The old Weather Bell is still at Clark and Monroe. There's a Walgreens there now, but this was once Bell Federal Savings. Lights on the bell used to report the weather. Green meant fair, yellow changeable, and red was for rain or snow. The lights still work, but they're not always accurate. It was sunny on the day we took these pictures. Bell Federal became part of LaSalle Bank in the 1990s. The top floor of the Allerton Hotel on North Michigan Avenue once housed the Tip Top Tap, a swanky nightclub. It closed in the 1960s. The top of the Allerton became so famous that radio legend Don McNeil built a studio up there in 1963 for his popular national radio show, The Breakfast Club.
Don McNeil Show came to you from the Clouds Room atop the Hotel Allerton in Chicago.
The owners of the upscale Clark Street Ale House have preserved the sign from the not-so-upscale bar that once occupied this property.
Back in a time when this was a very different neighborhood. Before gentrification, this was a street full of saloons.
The great writer Nelson Algren,
right.
He actually wrote about this block where we are right now. What did he say about it?
He once characterized someone who had a little bit too much fondness for the bottle by the fact that he never lived more than half a block from the 700 block of North Clark Street. I think people get interested in ghost signs because they're the city's memory. They're fragments of the past that linger on in the cityscape. The more you know about your city, the more you know about the past of your city, the richer your experience of the present is. As soon as you tune your eyes to see them, you see them everywhere.
The most fragile ghost signs are the hand-painted ones, sometimes revealed like a time capsule when an adjacent building is torn down, like this one on Lincoln Avenue in Chicago's Lincoln Square neighborhood. Unlike today's signs, which are usually just printed on disposable stretched vinyl, these old ones are made from lead-based paint. That's one of the reasons they live on long past their intended life.
The lead paint resists moisture, and so they become more visible during rainy periods or when they're hit by direct sun.
Nicole Donahoe photographed hundreds of ghost signs all over Chicago and created an online catalog of them for her master's degree in historic preservation. In the process, she developed a certain admiration for the rugged sign painters who called themselves wall dogs.
I don't know, but it seems like it's a very independent person. Loves of freedom, and it's a hard job. You know, they're outside, they're exposed to all the elements.
Those free-spirited wall dogs were just trying to make a living, but they've left us a record of how we lived. For example, this barely readable sign in a loop alley off of Wabash Street advertises the Harmony Cafeteria. Cafeterias were a new concept in cheap eats around the late 1800s. They were especially popular with women office workers who couldn't eat in bars like their male counterparts. The term cafeteria was actually coined in Chicago. A little farther south on Wabash, a sign for Lion and Healy survives from the days when this area was called Music Row. Dozens of musical instrument companies had their showrooms here. Piano maker W.W. Kimball had a recital hall on Music Row where famous pianists would demonstrate Kimball's fine instruments. DePaul University now owns most of the buildings here. Chicago once had afternoon newspapers in the days before the internet and 24-hour cable channels. The now defunct Daily News advertised to its working-class readership along streetcar and L lines.
When people took the train or the streetcar to and from work, they read a morning paper and an afternoon paper. And the Daily News, as the first afternoon penny paper, saw itself as the champion of the poor. The Daily News was a newspaper that had foreign correspondents before other papers did. It was also the best writer's paper.
Writers like Ben Hecht, Carl Sandburg, and Mike Royko appeared regularly. Professor Savage spotted one particular Daily News sign that really puzzled him at first because it was almost impossible to see from the street.
So I'm going down Milwaukee Avenue, I see this sign and I can't figure out how it would work because there's a 2-story building and a 3-story building. It's invisible from the street. So I realized that this Daily News sign was not just a ghost sign, it was a ghost sign for a ghost train. The L tracks that once would have been at the 2nd-story level providing a perfect view of this sign to its riders are now underground.
Sometimes ghost signs tell us things about our history that we're not so proud of. Take a look at this one, sandwiched in between 2 buildings here on Irving Park Road.
It's an old ad for Gold Dust dishwashing powder. It features 2 African-American children rendered as racist stereotypes. It was part of a campaign with slogans like, "Let the Gold Dust twins do your work." The sign had been buried behind an earlier building, but when that old structure was torn down to make room for new condos, the old ad was revealed. And not surprisingly, lots of people were offended and glad to see a new building return the sign to obscurity. Other signs remind us of efforts to combat racism, like this one on 95th Street. The black-owned Independence Bank lent money to African Americans in an era when many large banks would not. One of Independence Bank's founders was the great African American entrepreneur George Johnson. On 79th Street, you'll find an old ad for Joe Louis Milk. The great boxer gave away large sums of money after he retired, and he lost the rest of his fortune to failed business investments. This unintended memorial to him will eventually disappear too. In the end, the fleeting nature of these signs is part of their appeal.
They were meant to be disposable. They were meant to be repainted. One can't remove the sign and put it in a museum. There's sort of a momentary gift for people to look at.
You can find pictures of ghost signs around Chicago by visiting our website, WTTW.com. And 1 week from tonight, be sure to tune in to WTTW for Jeffrey Bear's full-length Hidden Chicago special. That's next Tuesday night at 7:30, right here on Channel 11.